Be Well with Michelle Greenwell. This is Season 1, Episode 7 with Victoria Piersig. Although there are many things that we can be bitter about with COVID and restrictions, there's a resiliency that meets our spirit, and there's a determination within that drives us to move past the could-haves to the what-ifs. Today's guest has lived her life in a similar fashion. Victoria arrived in Port Hawkesbury, Nova Scotia as the result of breaking ice on a tugboat on Lake Huron. She began as a photographer and graphic designer in her early days, then transitioned to special effects with her ex-husband's business for film and display. She created easy bake knockoffs from Mexico, and then worked in the financial industry for 14 years as an office manager for the New York Stock Exchange listed multinational. I'm not sure how we're going to weave her career as an Energizer bunny fluffer and couturier and a Tetley tea dance wrangler into the conversation, but I think you're starting to get the picture that this is no ordinary woman with a routine day job. As with all my guests, they find their way into a health challenge that provides them with a new education, and the path of discovery becomes a revolution in who we are as a person and what we're involved in. I've had the privilege of hearing about Vicki's artistic abilities and passion while sharing the arts education opportunities that have been created through the arts education sector with Cape Breton Partnerships assistance. Vicki's work is part of the Legacy Project, documenting and creating with the pandemic as the subject matter. Today's episode is titled, Take the Path Less Traveled and Shake Up Your Views. You're listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, Episode 7. Hello, Vicki, and welcome to the show.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
So as we start all our episodes with a cup of tea, I know you were showing me your teacup earlier. Do you want to share what kind of tea you chose for today?
So what I have is an organic black tea that I actually picked up in Liaoning, China, which is in the north near the Mongolian border. And I was very privileged to be there in 2019 as part of a group of international photographers brought over for a large international photography exhibition that dealt with industrial issues. And it was a German curator. We traveled around like celebrities because this is a part of China that never sees certainly no white people. And they have an organic tea farm there. It's wonderful.
That is so cool. I love where all these conversations around tea takes us. And the mug you chose today?
Well, the mug is my Bialetti mug. And it's actually the only mug I have. I'm kind of a bit of a minimalist. And it's the little Bialetti man with his finger up, the footballer in Italy, cheering on his team. So I'm really a coffee drinker.
Oh, well, I had marked down when I was preparing for the show what tea I was going to make. And then yesterday, when I sat down at the kitchen table to start my work, I determined that I needed a new tea blend. So I created one called I Choose Love, which is part of the Choose Love movement that I work with. And so that's what I'm drinking today. And my mug is Colton McDonnell's mug, which has the Cape Breton logo on it. And I was thinking of how you got to Cape Breton when I picked up the mug today. And I thought, yeah, I think it's Colton's mug for today. Just thinking about how special Cape Breton is and the people that come here and how they get here. It's always so interesting. That's beautiful. So you had mentioned a little bit about Tetley tea. So perhaps we could start with that story and you could share a little of that.
Oh, well, I don't know if you recall those Tetley tea dancers. It was animated. It was da 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 da. Anyways, that was just part of the whole special effects thing that I used to do with my husband. And we used to always joke that the Tetley tea dancers were the nicest people to work with.
Oh, that's fun. So let's dive in a little bit into your life as a fitness and wellness coach and how you ended up in there. Do you want to share that story?
Sure. Well, I was in my 30s. I was a real devotee of Iyengar yoga. And I love that style of yoga because they sort of were like drill sergeants and they yell at you a little bit. And I liked very much the structure. And I love the fact that the instructor was the class that I used to go to. He was well in his 50s and he would often say, yes, and maybe in 20 years, I might be able to do this properly. And so I love that. But I'd had an injury with my knee when I was a teenager, and it got worse and worse. And then I was riding my bike a lot. My daughter, when she was young, she took up figure skating, and the club that we went to was quite small, and we were able to get on the ice with the kids if you wanted to have an adult class. So I took up figure skating when I was in my later 30s, and hugely addictive, had loads of fun, and it just made my knee worse. So it got to the point where I would be walking down the road and all of a sudden I'd be on my knees trying to click it back into place. And that kind of got a little embarrassing on occasion. And so I went to the doctor and they did an arthroscopy and it still wasn't enough. And finally I went to a specialist who said, oh, well, you know, your legs aren't straight, you need an ACL repair. And if you really don't want to be crippled when you're, you know, at my age now, you really want to have an osteotomy, which is basically where they take a piece of your pelvis and use it as a wedge, and they break your femur and straighten your leg, and then they're going to take my ACL and repair it with my hamstring. And I was sort of sat there and I was like, oh dear. And I put it off 3 times. They won't do it if you're over 50 because I guess people don't come out of it very well. So I exercised like crazy ahead of it, and I was really strong. And as I got closer to 50, it was like, I guess I got to do this. So I did. And afterwards, I had a real hard time getting my natural walk back. And I went to a sports medicine clinic. They couldn't figure it out. And I got on an elliptical machine, and somehow the regularity was great. But the thing was that the gym I was going to got really expensive. And so I had to find myself a new gym, and I wound up at a local Good Life where I looked at everything and I was like, what the heck am I going to do here? So I got one of those personal fitness trainer gals and did a 6-session course with her. And she was like my daughter's age, 25, slip of a thing, big personality. And she fixed a shoulder injury I had from sailing with weight training. Well, I was hooked. It was not ever anything that I thought I wanted to do, but I embarked on 4 years of personal fitness training. And I became stronger than I ever was. I really felt empowered. And it was fun. And moving forward, I got packaged out of my day job. At that point, I was working in the fitness and in the financial industry. And I thought, well, gee, I don't really want to be doing that. At the time, my art career was starting to really get going. And I thought, well, maybe I could do this part-time. So I got myself all trained up as a coach, and I wound up working for Good Life. And I was particularly interested in working with people who were over 45. And so I did. And it was wonderful. I had some wonderful clients. The oldest one was 92, and he was still downhill skiing, and his core was like stronger than a lot of my much younger clients. And it was great. And while I was there, I took a course with someone named Brendan Fox, who has a cutting edge system of analysis and correctives for hard to spot issues in people. And he looks at your posture, he looks at how you walk. And he has a very simple series of tests that help guide you to find the source of a problem which may have been missed by many different practitioners. So yeah, that's my story.
That's so interesting. How everybody stumbles into these different places, and then how they weave themselves through information and then educate, and in your case, being able to pass it on again and send it down the line, which is fantastic. But then also being able to live with, you've got all those skills in your hand, and now you've got those to move forward with, which is so empowering. And that's the same, for me in this industry as well. My whole career has been the same kind of learning curve, and it's always rewarding every step of the way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what I find is that as we get older, so many people become afraid of their bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's almost like it's the enemy, and we lose track.
Well, I've enjoyed the classes I've been taking online and having someone instructing, because I've always been at the front for the last while. And it's actually discovering that you don't actually need that much strength training. You just need coordination training. And there were little patterns in there that weren't coordinating quite the right way. Even with what I know, they still weren't balancing out the right way. Someone else needed to be looking. And in that look, then everything's been brought back into balance. And it's amazing the strength that comes out of the body when it's balanced.
Yes, exactly. And one of the things that I learned is that, often when something bothers you, you want to stretch it out. And often that's the thing that makes it worse. And in fact, the pain comes from instability. And so oftentimes you're better off to stabilize the situation rather than trying to make it looser. So for instance, I have a shoulder thing where I had dislocated it many years ago, and oftentimes I guess things are stretched internally. And so when my shoulder gives me problems, I actually stabilize it rather than stretching it.
Rather than stretch. And two, not focusing on where the pain point is, but balancing it across so both shoulders are even, not just one. Yeah.
Well, and yes, and it typically works diagonally. So oftentimes that shoulder problem could be hip related.
Yeah. And then we're not always looking there. Or
no, that's right.
Or as we're talking to, and as I've noticed, particularly so much on Zoom, everybody tilts their head depending on what they're doing. And so you've got those people who they might tilt it when they're having a conversation and walk straight. But a lot of people actually have a tilted head most of the time, not realizing that that's what happens with it. And so being able to bring that back into balance and balance those shoulders back out as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it often comes from carrying that purse or the briefcase or whatever it is, and then it's like when you have a baby.
Yeah. But that's when we're much younger and we can, have those bad habits. Oh, I would love to divert the conversation over to your legacy project, because for those people, particularly in Cape Breton, who don't realize, those of us that have been working on these art sector projects, there are some really fantastic arts programs happening. And so I would love for you to share what you've been working on.
Well, I moved to Port Hawkesbury, and originally, I'll confess, I did not want to be living here. There's not a lot in the town. I lived for 60 years in Toronto and on the waterfront, and I actually lived in Canada's first housing cooperative for artists. And so I was surrounded by artists of all different sorts. And now here I am in a blue-collar town, which in truth I like, because my work is very industrial. However, it really is no contemporary art presence here. And my studio looks out at the harbor, and I'm looking out at it now. And I would see cars and trucks drive down constantly. When I moved here full-time permanently, it was just at the start of COVID, and people would be streaming by. They'd stop for a moment, turn around, and come back. When it got warm, nobody used the water. Nobody was walking. They would just drive down, look and see if anybody was around, and drive back. And I was just fascinated by this. Why isn't anybody using the water? If it was Toronto, people would be out there in droves. It gets colder there, and yet people are out in the water. They'll surf in the winter. We have so much wind. This could be an Olympic training center for sailboats, yet nobody is using the water. So I decided to lead by example and kayak the strait. And I'm just 100 meters from the little boat ramps. So I would portage my kayak down, hop in with camera and gear. People are always friendly. They would say hello. But when I'd offer them the front seat, they always decline. Oh, no, I can't do that. Oh, no. I'm sure it's fun. It looks like fun, but oh, no, I couldn't do that. And so my project is in part performance-based, leading by example, and it's also a recording of the town and the strait from the water, a view that most people don't ever get to see, and trying to show people that you can have fun out there. And in fact, it's translated into community involvement. I'm on the Waterfront Development Committee, where we have some exciting new concepts. And I think we're on a cusp of change, which I like to think that I've been a part of.
That is so interesting. Is there a particular sound from the water that surprised you?
No.
Okay. And you hear the cars going across the causeway, or?
Well, the causeway is a good 6 nautical miles away, I would think. Maybe not quite as far as that. So I tend not to get close enough to the causeway typically to hear that. But no, it's quite quiet out there, because we don't have a tremendous amount of boat traffic. And yeah, and otherwise it's a rural environment. So it's really just nature that you hear when you're out there.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So close to the shore, and Port Hawkesbury is busy with cars and people and trucks and, passing through. So
yeah, they pass through, and they don't stop. But it's the local population that it's right there. And it's free.
And it's
so
free.
Why not use it?
And you don't have to social distance when you're out there.
That's right, exactly.
Exactly. Okay, now I wanted to tap into a little bit of you jumping on the flagships, and then how that got you all the way to Cape Breton. Because like you said, you're a Torontonian, so Port Hawkesbury was not on your radar.
On ships. So I have been a sailor for most of my life, and we would do night races across Lake Ontario, which is very large. And you're always looking out for lake freighters. And I originally got involved in the project because I was interested in the disappearance of the Canadian-built ships from the landscape. And I wanted to get aboard them before they were all gone, because the ship owners were very busy replacing them with foreign-built ships, mostly from China. So I started traveling aboard ships. I wrangled my way aboard. And I'm still continuing the project in different facets, but I became interested in seafaring in general. And I realized that if I had known about it as a young woman, it would have been a career that I would have pursued quite happily. It's well paying, you get lots of time off, and there's something about being on the water that really appeals to me personally. So the project has changed directions many times. What I'm really interested in now, besides the labor aspect, is also what gentrification is doing to the landscape. So what happens is, if we think of ships as being the most sustainable mode of transportation, especially for heavy goods, gentrification of our shorelines is detrimental to industry. One shipload of iron ore is roughly equivalent to 16 kilometers of transport trailers, just end to end, idling.
Wow.
Wow. It's incredible. Or 350 rail cars.
350.
Sorry?
350, that's what you said? Wow.
Yes,
okay.
Cars. Yes. So it's a sustainable mode of transportation. But as we gentrify our shorelines, the people who are moving now don't want to see industry. So how do we balance the two? It's not really a question for Port Hawkesbury because we're used to industry right here. But in most communities, they're under a lot of pressure. And so I'm interested in those kind of issues, how we maintain balance and how we talk about these things in a way that's not confrontational. Because in my view, we just can't say no all the time. We're all using these things. So how does it get to us?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, even in the time as we moved here permanently in 2010. But we were traveling here well before that, almost 15 years before that. And no one played on the water. There wasn't a jet ski anywhere, sailboats. But now we have, even in Mabu here, we've got the sailboat club. And that is now more viable. And you see a lot more boats in Port Hood, as an example. I mean, we have the boat parade in Port Hood, which is a lot of fishing boats, but there's a lot more sailboats, smaller vessels. So it definitely has shifted since we first started coming to visit, and then what was possible. And then the kayak has been another huge shift, which wasn't there before as well.
Yeah, I think, as come from a ways, bring a different aspect to it, because most people growing up here viewed the sea as something to exploit for your income, but it's also viewed as, and rightly so, as dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that view of the water hasn't changed in Port Hawkesbury, but it has changed in some of these other communities.
Mm-hmm. And you're back out on the kayak again here?
Not quite yet. It's been a little cold and miserable. And even the few nice days we've had, it's been fairly windy. Mm-hmm. So no, not yet.
Not yet, but that's
I will be.
That's what I was wondering, if that was your plan still to go forward. So.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, we bought a brand new kayak, and we're excited to use it. My partner, Greg, he actually kayaked around Newfoundland and up the coast to Labrador. So he's, a big fan of kayaking.
Oh, lovely. That must have been quite the adventure too.
It must have been.
As you're now sitting at the edge of the completion of the Legacy project, do you have something else that's kind of drawn your attention that you might be working your way towards?
Well, I have a big project actually for Nordic Bridges, which is a co-production between the Nordic Ministers, which is an organization of ministers from the Nordic countries and Canada. And it's curated this year by Harbourfront Centre in Toronto. And I have a project that's been accepted for it, and involves an Innu community in the north. And I have a Swedish partner who would be doing a Sami community in Lapland. However, with COVID, I'm not sure if we can actually get our projects going in time for Nordic Bridges, which happens in 2022. So that one's a bit on the back burner.
Now, and also, I know just these last couple of weeks with the restrictions that came in, you were ready to put a whole project on exhibit.
Yes.
And then had to hold on that. Do you want to just talk a little bit about some of the artists that you were working with?
Yeah, so Tina Marie Fancy is a painter, and I haven't seen anybody's finished work. Actually, we've all been working on our various projects. So she's got a number of pieces. Susan Patton's a writer, but also she's got some virtual reality pieces for the show. And well, that's kind of problematic now because she'd be using Oculus headsets, which nobody would be putting on. Josie Clark, she's got some sculptural pieces that involve textile. and found objects. Alison Uma has, she does zines. Well, there's my kayak project. Oh, and Juliana Skertzner, she has, I don't want to call them puppets. They're kind of like that. They're sewn sculptural pieces. And again, I'm excited to see them all because we haven't seen each other's work.
You've all been talking about it, and then you were culminating for the exhibit, and yeah.
And so we were hoping to actually hang the show, get it up, and archive it, like record it for archival purposes, and do an artist catalog. And if we have even a few days where we might be able to open to the public, we're considering it, but we just don't know right now what's going to happen. And, as Dr. Strang said, we might very well have one more week of lockdown, so tagged on, so we'll have to see.
Yeah. Well, cross our fingers. And I know as artists, everybody is, they find the way to make things work in another way. So I know that exhibit will create itself some new possibility. So we'll be able to see what everybody has been up to. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Now with the podcast, I always try to do a little dance tip so that, people have been listening, they might be driving in their car, but I also want them to have the opportunity to think about where to put a little bit of dance in their day so they make sure they're moving. Do you want to share what you might want to do with that?
Well, we were talking about Facebook earlier and how I'm not really much of a user. However, when COVID started and we were all in lockdown, there was this couple who started to do a dance every day at 5:00. And it kind of got into this virtual dance party. They would post a song, and then you would shoot like a 30-second or so clip of yourself dancing to the song, and they would post it on Facebook. And a lot of them, I think, had gone to York University back in the day together, the fine art program. And the videos were fun. So somehow, someone invited me to this thing. And I thought, oh, okay, I like to dance. And I did a few. And it became a highlight of my day, especially when my partner was away seafaring and I was stuck alone in lockdown. I look forward to dressing up and, getting my iPad set up and doing a little dance. And I actually met a few old friends who I hadn't seen in 30 years through this whole thing.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah. People still post periodically.
That's wonderful. All right. So for all those people who've been listening to the podcast, we invite you to pick a song, put on some costuming, and do a little boogieing. And if you want to videotape it and put it up, we would love to see that shared. And I'm always happy to share anything dance related on my Facebook page for Dance Debut. So there's the invite that's gone out for everybody. And if you choose not to do that, there's always a good dancing in your living room and risky business. You could have some fun with a hairbrush and pretend it's your microphone and go for it. So,
yeah. And if you listen to BBC Radio 6 on Saturday evening, oh gosh, what's his name? Craig Charles does a funk and groove show that is just fantastic. And everybody talks about dancing in their living room.
Beautiful. Vicki, thank you so much for letting us have a peek into the map of life and all the forks in the road that have expanded your vision. And I do wish you the very best with the finishing of your project. I hope that the exhibition can come off in some way. And I really hope that the people of Cape Breton Island and beyond can really see what the artists have been doing and focusing on for this whole year, because it has been quite a delight to be a part of the projects and where people have taken their experience to. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
You've been listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, and may you continue to stay healthy and vibrant as you find your passion for living and share it with the world. Have a great day.